There have been times where America's shown arrogance and been dismissive, even derisive. The United States is still working through some of our own darker periods in our history. We've at times been disengaged, and at times we've sought to dictate our terms. We have to acknowledge potentially we've made some mistakes. That's how we learn. Unfortunately, faced with an uncertain threat, our government made a series of hasty decisions. In other words, we went off course.
September 11th, on the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks, expected protests erupt in Cairo after an anti-Islam video was played on Egyptian TV. The U.S. Embassy in Cairo puts out a statement condemning the video.
The unrest around the region has been in response to this video.
We've seen rage and violence directed at American embassies over an awful internet video that we had nothing to do with.
As a consequence of the video.
Here's what happened. You had a video that was released by somebody who lives here, sort of a shadowy character, who is an extremely offensive video directed at Muhammad and Islam.
When I spoke to the British Parliament a year and a half ago, I said our cause was human freedom, and so it has been. We've tried to bring a new honesty and moral purposefulness to our foreign policy, to show we can be candid about the essential differences between ourselves and others while still pursuing peace initiatives with them. As I've said before, the democracies have their own serious injustices to deal with. But this should not prevent us from making the crucial moral distinctions between pluralist systems which acknowledge their own wrongs and shortcomings, and systems that excuse their defects in the name of totalitarian ideology. Our willingness to speak out on these distinctions is the moral center of our foreign policy. For us, human freedom is a first principle, not a bargaining chip. To fail to publicly enunciate the differences between totalitarian and democratic systems of government would be to forsake this moral high ground. We didn't seek this leadership. It was thrust upon us. In the dark days after World War II, when much of the civilized world lay in ruins, Pope Pius XII said, "The American people have a genius for splendid and unselfish action. And into the hands of America, God has placed the destinies of afflicted humanity." Throughout World War II and most of the post-war era, though the adversaries changed from Hitler to Stalin, there was still basic agreement on the moral imperative of defending freedom and the self-evident differences between totalitarian and democratic governments. But that broad consensus of the Truman, Eisenhower, Kennedy years began to break down in the 60s and 70s, partly in response to the Vietnam tragedy. An era of paralyzing self-doubt ruled out just and legitimate uses of American power, even acts of self-defense. The consequences of America's retreat were not long in coming. All of you can remember a few years back when the tragedy of the Iranian hostages was fresh in our minds, when around the world, especially in Afghanistan and Central America, Soviet expansionism proceeded unchecked, when our defenses had declined dramatically and some nations thought they could threaten or harm the United States with impunity. We've changed this. We're trying to see to it that American citizens, and it doesn't matter whether they're Navy pilots in the Gulf of Sidra or medical students in Grenada, can no longer be attacked or their lives endangered with impunity. You know, Jean Kirkpatrick, our ambassador to the United Nations, has a wonderful story to explain how fundamental this reversal has been. She says that when she arrived at the UN, someone asked her what would be different about our administration's foreign policy. Well, she said, we've taken off our kick me sign. She was asked, does that mean if you're kicked, you'll kick back? Well, not necessarily, she replied, but it does mean that if we're kicked, at least we won't apologize.